There we go. All right, everyone give it up for John Peter Haywood.
Thanks, Pat. I don't normally get called by my entire full name very often.
I mean, I just go with what's on the sheet, right?
I know. So most people know me as
I'm an
JP.
imposter.
We'll rock and roll with that. So, yeah, thanks, Pat. I think Pat's doing a great job this weekend, so let's give him a round of applause. Make some noise. And if you haven't checked out his podcast, it's well worth it. Risky Biz. I really enjoy that. And while we're on people doing a good job, the organisers and volunteers, I think, deserve a big round of applause as well. So let's make a lot of noise for them. Let's see if we can get those guys in the CTF wondering what's going on. That was like an average, maybe. And how about you guys? You guys have to be the most attractive audience I've ever seen this morning. So a round of applause for yourselves. Come on, guys. Come on, come on. Average. All right. Well, there's going to be some audience participation this morning. I'm sorry. And that was just to kind of get you warmed up a little bit. So it all started off on a Wednesday night with a long drive. The white line stretched out in front of me. And I have got some podcasts on the playlist. And I picked one particularly that was about imposter syndrome. And the reason I'd done this, I'd noticed on InfoSec Twitter that imposter syndrome had come up a few times. I didn't really know what it meant. I was like, okay, interesting, let's find out a little bit more. And by the time I got home from my long drive, I kind of figured out two things. One was, I knew what I was going to submit for CrikeyCon. And the second one was that I'd experienced imposter syndrome. So a disclaimer, first of all, by no means I'm a health expert at all. I've just done some research. I found this interesting, and that's what I'm sharing with you guys today. So before you go out and act on anything I say, do your due diligence and your own research, and if you need, make sure you contact a proper professional. So it would be pretty cool if imposter syndrome was like some next level red team thing, right? Where you can just be anyone. You know, you'd have all the pen test firms lining up at the hospital. Hey, you got any of those imposters? We need to do some red team. But it's not quite like that. It'd be pretty cool. Oh, too many clicks. So according to Clance and Imes, so they're two ladies that did some research way back in 1978. It's the inability to experience or accept success internally, regardless of external evidence. So, regardless of the external evidence, you don't accept that success. So what kind of happens is you end up creating like this false self. So there's two of you happening inside. And the false self is the person that's doing all the hard work and getting the success. And the true self isn't able to take that on board. And what that means is you feel like an imposter because it's not your true self that you're attributing the work. So what happens is everybody kind of sees these things on the outside, right? So your knowledge, your experience, your skills, your abilities, and they just see you as one person, right? They don't see you as this false person and this true person. But on the inside, you have trouble correlating these things with yourself. It's kind of the opposite to Dunning-Kruger, which you may have heard of. It's a little bit more widely known. So Dunning-Kruger is like, you know, we all know people like this, right? Where they think they know everything and they don't know anything, nothing. Imposter syndrome is the opposite, where you actually know the things, but you think you don't. So this is how it starts. There's an imposter syndrome cycle. And normally you start off with an achievement-related task. Okay, so you might be at work, you get a task from your boss, you decide to apply for a new job, your wife wants you to build, I don't know, a cubby house or something. You start feeling anxiety and self-doubt, a little bit of worry about this task. And then normally one of two things happens. You either go down a track of over-preparation. So, you know, this is your perfectionist, needs to be 100% golden golden nugget, or you put it off and you leave it for as long as you can because you don't really know where to start. You actually end up completing the task and you have this great big feeling of relief. Oh, I've done it. Awesome. Except you then start getting some praise for that task and you start discounting that feedback. So you might say things like, well, you know, anyone could have done it if they'd put in as much effort as me. And it tends to be the kind of thing that you might say if you come down the over-preparation path. Or you might say, oh yeah, I was just lucky. And I've heard that a few times this weekend, right? Oh yeah, I just stumbled across this O-Day. I was lucky, right? Didn't take any skill at all. A 3-year-old could have done it, when really, you know, that's not the case. What happens then, we discount this feedback, and then that feeds back into our perceived fraudulence or our fake self. We increase self-doubt, we get more anxious, and in some cases it can lead to more serious things like depression. What happens next is really cool, or maybe not so much, because you start again, right? You get a new task, and then you start worrying, you start feeling anxious, and you go through that cycle. So what kind of people get imposter syndrome? And imposter syndrome, it's not really a syndrome, technically. Apparently syndrome's like a medical term. Like I said, I'm not an expert. It's more of a phenomenon, or sometimes it's called imposter feelings. But most people know it as imposter syndrome. It can happen to, for a number of reasons. So it could be, who knows, maybe a stressful job, global warming, your crazy parents. And it is actually one of these things that's the root cause. It's your crazy parents. So you can actually blame your parents and family in this. So thanks, Mum and Dad. Appreciate that. So how does it happen? So you're a little kid, right? And your parents have said things like, oh, you're so smart. You can do anything you put your mind to. Stuff happens really easy for you. You know, you knew 2 languages. You could count to 10 before you even came out of the womb. Like, you were awesome. And you're like, oh yeah, okay. And you're like, yeah, this stuff's cool. But then one day, it actually isn't that easy. It starts getting hard. But your parents are saying, hey man, like, you find this stuff so easy. And you have to do some work. And I certainly remember when that happened to me, when I kind of realized I had to actually do some study to pass exams. Like, that was tough. I couldn't just remember what the teacher said. And what happens is, you're like, well, my mum and dad are saying that this stuff should be easy, but it's not. And they're also telling me that I'm really smart, so maybe I'm not. And you start the self-doubt cycle, right? And it kind of continues as you go through, and you start working harder and harder and harder and harder because you want to try and live up to the expectations that your parents and family are setting. So you work harder, and then they see the results. Ah, look how easy you find it. You're like, man, I'm working hard. And you work harder. So the other way it affects you as a kid is when you're not that smart person, it's when you're the other one, right? And your parents say things like, ah, you're the pretty one. You're the life of the party. You're the funny one. You know, you're the socially adept one. You got all the friends, the good lines. And what happens is, a lot of the time, you're actually as smart, maybe smarter than your sibling. And you're like, I'm going to show mum and dad. I'm going to show them that I can do the stuff that my brother and sister's doing. So what happens? You start working hard. And you start working really hard, and you start getting results. And sometimes you get better results than your brother or sister, but your mum and dad don't acknowledge it, all right? They don't say, oh, how smart are you? They say, oh, you're so funny. And you go, oh man, I've got to work harder. Make them notice me. And you're on this quest for acknowledgement. So there are some other causes, and a lot of the time, from what I can tell, these childhood things kind of lay dormant until something else kind of triggers it. So the cycle, so you're starting to feel anxious and you get yourself in that cycle and it kind of escalates from there. Also, the need to be special or the best, and you can kind of see that coming out of that second scenario as a kid. The characteristics of a Superman or a Superwoman, like, I don't know, kind of fit in this, I think, where you're trying to be the best that you can be across like 60 million different things, right? So you're working really hard at work because you want to be the best at work, and then you come home and you're trying to be the best dad ever, and you're trying to be the best husband ever, and you're trying to be the best everything, and there's only so many hours in the day. Fear of failure is another thing that can drive this. Also, and the fear of failure is like where that procrastination thing comes in sometimes, right? So you don't actually want to start doing something because you're afraid you're going to fail at it. And then your denial of ability and discounting praise. So, and then there's also the feeling of fear or guilt about success. And in the original research, it was a different time, back in the 70s. This was a lot around women in particular not feeling comfortable that they were successful because it was seen that successful women were not, like motherly and loving, that they're hard and driven, and that wasn't really traits that people particularly wanted. So it affects a wide range of people. So different races, different sexes, different backgrounds, cultures, countries. It's pretty much a universal thing. And it affects high performers. So, sports people, we've got successful business people, entrepreneurs, you've got doctors and surgeons, you've got teachers and lecturers, academics, and, InfoSec professionals like yourself. So Einstein, most people would reckon he's probably one of the most clever people in the whole world, right? Across time. And you can see from the quote that he's kind of experiencing some of these imposter syndrome traits, right? He's like seeing himself as a swindler. And, this is Einstein. If anyone knows stuff, it's him, right? How's that supposed to make the rest of us feel? I've pulled out a couple of other famous people. So we've got Mike Myers, right? And depending whether you like Austin Powers or not, you might not think that he's got any talent at all. And, personally, I think I liked him better in Wayne's World. But anyway, you guys are lucky. I had a whole presentation with Austin Powers in it for my Sec Talks. So they suffered through that. Sorry, guys. Emma Watson from Harry Potter is another one. And J-Lo, she's pretty successful, I think most people would argue, but she doesn't feel like it. So how many people experience things like this? So I did a little experiment. I reckon probably about here. So everybody that side, just put up your hand. All right? So what do you reckon that's about? It's about 15%. So if you think it's more than 15% of people, I want to hear you say more. Okay, are you ready? Go. More. If you think it's less, let me hear. Say less. No one thinks it's less. Okay. So let's go. These people over here, hands up. So that's like 40%, do you reckon? So if you think it's more than 40%, say more. More. If you think it's less? Oh, there's a couple of people. All right. Let's go over to about here. So if you're on this side, hands up. I reckon that's about 70%, right? If you think it's more than 70%, say more. If you think it's less? Interesting. Most people agree it's actually 70%. Different research, that figure moves, maybe down to 60, maybe up to 80. So those 70% people, put your hands up. So you imagine if I said, if you guys feel like this, go on that side of the room. And if you don't, go on that side. That's what it would look like. All right? So that's one of the things with imposter syndrome, is a lot of people think they're the only people that feel like that. when in actual fact they're not. So there's some traits that we kind of have come out that it's our subconscious way of trying to work ourselves out of the cycle, right? And one of those is diligence and hard work. So this is where I kind of fit in mostly. You know, I try and be 100% of everything. You know, I kind of think back to the time where I was trying to learn InfoSec in as short a time as possible, as deep as possible across everything from red team to blue team to reverse engineering to governance to, you know, you get the idea, right? There's a lot of stuff. And you just work, and you get home from work, and then you study, and you sleep and you dream about it, and then you wake up and you eat it for breakfast. And it's just, you just got that one-track mind, right? You're just trying to get all the stuff in. And what I realized after listening to that podcast is I was actually working to somebody else's expectations, right? That I thought one of my previous bosses needed me to, you know, do some more stuff and get some more qualifications to kind of prove out where I needed to be. And I was just working, right? No fun for my wife, that's for sure. So the idea is that you're trying to work and fill that gap between your true self and your fake self. And so trying to merge those together. But remember that fake self is somebody else's expectation of you a lot of the time. And it's not necessarily based on real life either. Trait number 2 is phoniness and inauthenticity. So this is an interesting one. It doesn't kind of play out the way that I thought. So this is about being inauthentic about your comments, right? About what you say and what you do. So you might be in a meeting and everyone's talking and brainstorming. And if you demonstrate this trait, what you'd normally do is just agree with everyone, right? Because you don't feel like your opinion really counts for that much, right? Because you've got this feeling of fraud. You're like, oh, I don't really know. You know, I'm not that great at this thing. I just won't say anything. And then I won't get found out, right? And this can be a problem sometimes because, you know, your boss may have hired you for those ideas. And if there's a proportion of the team with this trait, it just ends up being the boss's idea that gets put through. And a lot of the time, we like our bosses, but some of their ideas need a little bit of work, a little bit of help. But if we're not giving that to them because we don't feel like we have the experience to do that, it can cause trouble. The third trait is charm and perceptiveness. So this is where you end up sort of going, well, look, if they find me out because I'm a rubbish InfoSec guy, maybe they'll keep me on because I organise morning tea every week and I'm on the Christmas party and the social club and I'm helping out this department with that thing and I'm doing, you know, this thing, and you go off and you find all these other things to get busy with so that, you know, you got a backup plan. If they find me out, they'll keep me on because I'm, you know, a nice guy and I do all this other stuff. But what happens is you go off and you do those things and then you start feeling like a fraud doing those things, all right? So then you go and find more things and you feel like fraud doing those. And you get, it's just a cycle. You're just going round and round and round. There's things in here as well, you know, charm, you're trying to, you know, be everybody's friend, which can sometimes lead back into that inauthenticity one where you don't want to say your idea because you might not want to upset someone. I've given it away there. Okay, so is imposter syndrome a bad thing, a good thing, or somewhere in the middle? Well, it kind of depends, right? So there's a lot of successful people that feel like this, and it actually drives them to some of those successes. So it's not entirely bad. It can help you get out of bed in the morning. It can help you get stuff done. But if it's not managed and you get into that cycle and you're going around and around and around and around, it can actually end up being bad because it can lead to things like chronic anxiety and depression. All right, so I said there's audience participation. So we're actually going to do a survey. So I know all of you will probably have your laptop or your phone, and now's the time to get it out. Now, this is going to be anonymous, so Don't panic, I'm not recording any details. So if you go here, so tinyurl.com/jp-crikey, or if you really want, the QR code should work. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. So what we'll do is, as we go through the talk, you guys can fill this out. It's 20 questions. The idea is that you just go through, straight off the cuff, don't think too much about it. Bam, 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 submit. And then later on, we'll have a look at the results. And one of the reasons for doing this is, I have a feeling that InfoSec's a little bit different, and I'll explain my reasons why. But I couldn't actually find any evidence to back it up. So I thought, while I was here, we'll do a quick little survey and see if I can find some of that evidence. So you guys might prove my theories wrong, you might prove them right, or we might be on the fence. Because, we don't want to project our opinions. All right, so there's like a scale of 1 to 5. 1's not at all true, 5's very true. You get the idea, right? So why do I think that people in InfoSec might experience this a little bit more? So, well, first of all, InfoSec is a really deep field, I think, right? It covers a range of topics. I kind of elaborated on this earlier. A range of topics, right? So you've got the guys configuring appliances, they're kind of in the security industry. We've got guys writing exploits for binary. We've got, I don't know, dudes that are like reverse engineering, and that's their whole life is doing reverse engineering. So we have this really broad spectrum, and a lot of the time, we kind of expected to know how all these bits fit in together, especially if you're working on defense, but it also happens on the offensive as well, right? So as a pen tester, you kind of expected to know if a customer comes up, how to pen test that application in that language on that hardware, all right? As a defender, you're expected to be able to defend against whatever attack of the day, whether it's Spectre, like you got to go talk to your boss about CPU architecture and whether we're at risk of this thing or not. And that's not my background, so you've got to go and try and work these things out. Also, the rate of change is something else that I think plays into this, because you can't actually sit down and go, well, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, so I need to learn these things, because you don't really know what's going to happen, right? Somebody might come up with some DNS rebinding attack that you've never heard of, and then you've got to go and search your infrastructure to see if you're vulnerable to that, right? This is also something else, is comparing yourself to others, right? So you might be sitting there working and working and working on something, and you're looking at everybody else that's having success, right? They're dropping O-Day on Twitter, and you're like, man, so easy for them. I've been doing this thing for like at least a month. I can't get anywhere. And what you don't see is that behind that O-Day that they just dropped on Twitter is like 5, 6, 10 years, 20 years worth of effort and background that's gone into that. Our adversaries are also something else that I think is different in InfoSec, right? So I bet you've probably got friends that aren't in the industry, and I bet you they don't get out of bed in the morning, jump up, all right, North Korea, here I come, I'm taking you on, man. And then when I'm done that, organised crime, I'm going to slow you down. Yeah. But that's us, right? If you're a librarian, you're probably not thinking that in the morning. You're just going to go and do some books or something, right? I don't know. I'm sure it's more than that. So another thing is diversity. So it's not the amount of diversity, it's the lack of diversity. So for example, I kind of look around the room. There's a lot of people that kind of look like me. So if I'm someone in information security and I don't look like me and look like everybody else in the room, and I already have these imposter feelings, and I feel like I don't belong, and I can't see anyone else that looks like me, that just reinforces that bias I have, right? And this is kind of going back to that original research in 1978 that Clance and Imes did around women and their imposter feelings. It's still current today, but it's not just women, it's different cultures, races, all sorts of things. So I think that's why it's really important things like the Crikey Women event are run, so that if somebody's feeling like that, they can look around the room and go, you know what, I do belong here, right? I'm nervous, I'm clicking more than once. All right, so how do we fix it? Well, hopefully we haven't employed this guy, because he's not the sharpest nail in the toolbox. I don't know, I liked it, right? Like, what is he doing? We can't actually fix it, but we can manage it, right? So we don't do it with Bitcoin miners. It seemed to be the answer for yesterday's quiz section. So we do it by recognising patterns. And if you're thinking it kind of looks like a magic eye picture, who knows? But by recognising the patterns of imposter syndrome, you can actually start to manage it. You can recognise when you start having these feelings. You can make a choice whether you want to act on them or not. Like I said, sometimes it's a good thing. It gets you out of bed in the morning. But sometimes you just need to kind of take a break and reset. Otherwise it leads to bigger problems. You can also reframe your beliefs. So this is about scripts that run around in your head and what you believe, right? So one that I realised, because I've been thinking about this since listening to that podcast, one that I realised I had was that if I'd done IT at uni instead of business, I'd know how to code, right? Everyone knows that's what Udemy's for. You don't have to go to uni, it's $15, you're done. But I realised that I wasn't actually going out and learning how to code, even though I wanted to, because I had this belief in my head that said that I could only do it if I had done it at uni. Which is, you know, I'm sure you guys agree that's not sensible, but by identifying them, these scripts that play in your head, you can change them. And you're like, right, logging on, here we go. Notice your tendency to compare. So we touched on this before with the boyfriend meme. So if you are going to compare yourself to other people, make sure you got the full story. Don't just look at their manicured social media site, right? But for the most part, it's probably best not to. You shouldn't be sitting there going, well, you know, so-and-so had been in that job for 2 years and then they got this promotion, I should too, right? Make sure that you're comparing yourself to actual facts. Also, note your reasons for not accepting feedback, right? So that feedback that you get that you discount, note the reasons why. So if you say, you know, hey dude, good job on that thing, and you go, oh, I was just lucky. Or congratulations on the new job. Oh, you know, I was the only one in the company, so they just gave it to me, right? Hear yourself saying these things, write them down, and then what you can do is you can go back and try and reframe them. You can also say thank you, and it's just an easy way to stop that script from playing. Hey dude, congratulations on the new job. Thank you. Job done, all right? You've stopped the script. Easy peasy. Also, commit to authenticity. So if somebody asks you for your opinion, within reason, you know, pitch it to the right audience. But if someone asks you for your opinion, don't just echo theirs back at them, because that's probably not what they want. They probably actually want to hear what you think. And unless you do that, you'll never have your opinions validated. So you'll never actually know whether you've got good ideas or not, because you're just regurgitating somebody else's. And another thing that we can do is talk about it. And this is, you know, one of the main reasons that I'm here today, is that this was a takeaway from that podcast. I was like, well, the easiest things to talk about it, I need to talk for CrikeyCon, so let's do this one. And it doesn't have to be in front of a whole audience. That's probably, you know, down to my imposter syndrome of taking on too many things, but it can just be one-on-one or in a small team back at the office. And it's kind of like the boogeyman, right? If you turn the light on and open the door, it's just a hat and a coat. There's nothing more than that, right? And it's the same a little bit with imposter syndrome. If you open the door and look at it, you go, oh yeah, okay, it's not that scary after all. Shall we see our results? hopefully a little better than Brexit. Whoa, well done, 139. Awesome. All right. So I'm not going to read all of these out because that would be tedious. But as we just go through, you've read all the questions, you kind of know where we're going. So from memory, 1 is not very often, and 5 is all the time. So we can see for most people, it's in this 4 column, isn't it? Like 52, right? So what's that, 37% and 30%, that's almost 70% of people think that they got a job because they're in the right place or they knew the right people, right? So look at this, it's backing up what I thought. This one's interesting, this one's kind of been the other way. But interesting fact is that I thought my university entrance was attributed to a mistake. So I had a friend that applied for uni as well, and I actually hadn't finished school yet. I was like a year early, and I put in because I had enough at school, and I got in and she didn't, and she was pretty smart. And I kind of went, you know what, it must have been because I put mine in first, and the class had filled up before they got to hers, right? So I think we can agree that as a group, there's probably a few of us here that have experienced some of these feelings.
You're all a bunch of hyper-competitive weirdos, if that last one's anything to go by.
Yeah, I know, right?
If I'm not the best, I want to die.
But that's it, like, we're all competing against everybody else, but not at a truthful level where we're trying to outdo social media profiles and all sorts of crazy things. So here we go, just to summarize, recognize the patterns, okay? Reframe your beliefs, so that's about those scripts. Notice your tendency to compare. Note your reasons for not accepting feedback. Say thank you. That's a really good one to try and get out of that excuse script. Commit to authenticity, so make sure you submit your ideas. And discuss with others. So in a nutshell, that's how we can manage it. So what next? Where do we go from here? Well, like I said before, I'm not an expert. If you want to do your own research, Google imposter syndrome with Clance and Imes. So they're the 2 ladies that did the first bit of research into this. And another one is Jordan Harbinger. So he has a podcast. That's the one that I listen to. I think he probably does a much better job than me, but maybe that's just my imposter syndrome again. And maybe when you're on your drive home tonight and that white line stretched out in front of you, you can think back over some of your experiences and see if they line up with imposter syndrome. Thank you.
As someone who's completely non-technical, who's spent 18 years in a technical discipline, I have no idea what imposter syndrome looks like at all. Should have come with a trigger warning, that one. It's funny, right? Because I remember speaking to someone recently, a good friend, who was feeling a little bit anxious about their job, right? They sort of worried, oh, they're gonna bundle me out of here. It was like imposter syndrome all over. This is someone I've known for a long time, very, very capable, with an unusual skill set that was perfectly fitted to this job as well. So I said to them, and it was a management position, big deal job. And I actually managed to really help them with it by one thing, and I think it's a question that a lot of people could do well to ask themselves. Just I said, okay, who else can do your job? If you were to leave tomorrow, who else would you hire to do your job? And they start rattling off these names of people who are running very successful businesses, people who are doing other shit, right? I said, okay, let me rephrase. Who would you hire to do your job who would actually take your job? Yeah. And it's a question It's a question I think a lot of people can really do well to ask themselves sometimes.
It's an interesting point. So recently I had a task to actually hire somebody to fill my job for about 3 months. And I had to write a position description because I didn't have one at that point. And actually going through and writing out what it is that I wanted somebody to know and do.
Who on God's green earth can do all of these things, yeah.
And I was like, holy crap, I actually do know a fair bit of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. And maybe, that's some homework for people. That,
yeah. Try to imagine your replacement. Who's got questions? Anybody? We've got one over here.
Yeah, mate, excellent talk.
Thanks.
Just wondering advice, and maybe you don't want to answer this, but what about team leaders who see people in their team that have imposter syndrome?
What can they do about it? So the question is, what can team leaders do to help people on their teams who might, be obviously suffering from imposter syndrome?
And just adding the note
Yep.
of what the parents have said, that could have been negative.
Of what the...
Like, it comes easy to you.
Yeah. Let's take the team leader part first. So I think there's a couple of things that we can do. I'm a team leader myself, generally speaking. Like I said, someone else is doing my job for a bit, so good luck to them. Thanks, Jamie. What we can do, if you do recognise that, I guess one of the things is to talk about it. And you don't have to single that person out and go, hey, I think you feel like a fraud, and they're going to go, huh? Good job, I make all those cakes because I'm about to get it, right? But maybe bring it up.
I brought cookies.
Yeah. Maybe bring it up, right, and say, hey, I went to this talk at CrikeyCon and they're talking about this thing and blah, 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 blah. How do you guys feel about that? Is it something that you guys feel about? And also, I have thought about this, like try and reinforce for your team where you do see them doing good work. So hopefully you can kind of do that.
Can it be as simple as just one-on-one sincerity by calling someone in and saying, look, sometimes I feel like maybe you don't realise that you are in fact doing a good job, and these 5 things that you've done recently, like, no bullshit, you're actually doing a really good job, and I just want you to know that and feel that. I mean, can it be as simple as that, or is that it can?
Yeah, and like those scripts that you have in your head, you'll actually hear other people say, right? Like I said, I heard some of them up on stage over the weekend where people are going, I was just lucky and I found that thing, right? That's the kind of thing you say, well, no, actually, that took a lot of skill. There's a lot of people that wouldn't have been able to do that, and it wasn't.
But that's a complicated thing, right? Like, you're talking to someone who's basically won the cosmic lottery job-wise, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. I'll just, we've got a bottle of scotch and I'll sit there weeping about it. But does anyone else have a question?
So one thing that's interesting, you're talking about people here who know but if you're trying to communicate to another generation who has no absolutely any idea what the hell you're doing, or people who are not in your industry who have no idea what you're doing, how can you justify yourself in that environment? Because in fact you really you have to sell yourself on the basis of no one knowing what the hell's going on. So that's difficult.
It is.
So how do we rephrase that question?
I think something about talking to your boss.
No, I think the question was, we're intergenerational aspects to this.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you convince someone else that of your work? How do you convince your
Yeah, how do you convince someone of their worth? And of course, we haven't even had the conversation about like when humility is actually justified, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's all very well and good for everyone to claim. I think it's sometimes good to recognise that we've been lucky. I don't necessarily think that that's a really unhealthy thing.
Yeah,
And
but
obviously not a
if everything
psychologist,
you're saying is put down to luck, then...
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. All right, well, I think it is actually time to bring on the next talk. Everyone, thank
Sounds good. Thanks.
John Peter Haywood. Thank you.